How to Build a Multi-Billion-Dollar Business in Africa from Scratch by Masiyiwa, compiled by Geoffrey Tengamba, being read to you by Arnold Rangakuramia. Chapter 10. Making Sound Financial Decisions. Poverty can come at a bewildering speed if one is careless in the manner they approach matters of financial decision making. Financial literacy. One of my favorite TV programs is Global Public Square on CNN, anchored by Farid Zakaria. The other day he spent some time talking about a subject that is very close to my heart: financial literacy. There is more to literacy than reading and writing. Financial literacy is really about the ability to understand everyday financial issues, and here I am not talking about accounting practice. I am talking about the ability to make sound financial decisions. There are many people who know how to read and write very well and yet are 6s and 7s when confronted with simple financial issues. Which reminds me, I knew a businessman who wanted to leave an inheritance to his 2 children. They were both highly competitive, with each ever seeking ascendancy on the other. So this is what he did. To one, he gave a parcel of land and said to her, "This land is full of minerals, which I believe are worth at least $10 million. You cannot sell this land at any time. The land yields no income as it is unless you get an investor or a loan. And should you seek an equity investor, it can only be your brother to whom you go. I estimate you will need not less than $1 million to generate any income from it. It is my only inheritance for you." To the other child, a young man, he said, "Take this $1 million in cash. Based on your lifestyle, it will be gone in a few years unless you find a way to grow it. Should you decide to invest it, I would insist that you go only to your sister. It is my only inheritance for you." Who got the greater inheritance? Who emerged in ascendancy? Discuss it with your friends and business partners. If you have to say anything to me about it, don't use more than 1 paragraph. The correct answer in business is not philosophical or ideological. It's just business. Whether you're in business or not, whether you have a job or are unemployed, even if you are still a student, you might even be a social entrepreneur, a doctor, a teacher, you still live in a world in which every day you have to make sound financial decisions. You also live in a world in which others around you, including the local and national leaders, as well as business leaders, must have the capacity to make sound financial decisions for the well-being of all. Ultimately, how sound your financial decision making is will be seen in the results. Time will tell, as they say, whether our 2 young heirs would make sound financial decisions. One is not born with the capacity to make sound financial decisions. It comes through education, reading the right material, and also training. Being promoted to a top position in your organization or even being elected to public office does not suddenly endow you with financial literacy if you did not acquire and develop it earlier in your life. The evangelist Miles Monroe once said in one of his teachings, "The rich man and the poor man have this in common: God gives sight to both of them." I have seen people who inherited greater riches than what these young people got go on to lose them, even ending up in debts that far exceeds what they got in the first place. Poverty can come at a bewildering speed if one is careless in the manner they approach the matters of financial decision making. And there is no one who is exempt from having to make sound financial decisions. Even if you are in the village with a few cows and goats, it is even more critical. I have also seen people who started with very little go on to create spectacular wealth for themselves and their nations. At the heart of this is the ability to make sound financial decisions. It must be made each and every day. It must be done for the short and for the long term. Sometime when you are on your own in the quiet of the day, ask yourself this question: am I really making sound financial decisions in the affairs of my life? Even when I get $25, does it increase or decrease in my hands? It always, always starts with how well you handle even the smallest sums. Make a conscious effort to acquire and develop your financial literacy. It does not matter how old you are, even if you are 63 years old. There is a story told about a young entrepreneur who had been working on an amazing new idea. After sealing a major contract, he and his friends decided to go and celebrate at a local restaurant. They ate and drank until very late. Finally, when it was time to close, they called for the bill. It was a shocking amount, and much more than they could afford. Ever the entrepreneur, the young man asked to see the owner and told him about his business venture and how he believed that it would one day make him billions. So he offered the old man some shares for the large bill he had run up that evening. The old man, who owned the business, refused completely and demanded payment. Humiliated, the young man pledged his car and went off to find the money. Many years later, the young man returned to the restaurant driving a gleaming Ferrari. He asked to see the owner of the business, who immediately remembered him. He told the old man that he was now a billionaire, and that had he accepted the deal that night, he might have been worth millions himself. The old man smiled, looked at the young man lovingly, and said, "Son, I am very happy for you. I am also happy with the decision I made that day." And with that, he quietly and happily went back into his little restaurant. Financial decisions. It took me more than 10 years and much meditation to come to agree with the old man. How to hold on to money. As a young business person, it took me about 10 years to realize that it is harder to hold on to money than to make money. Sadly, many people never actually realize it throughout their business life or even career. I recently read a report which showed that many working professionals in a major European country have enough savings to last 18 days if they ever lost their jobs. The squirrel, a small animal that collects nuts during the summer for the long winter, would no doubt be amused. A business associate who ran a construction company came to me once, complaining bitterly that people were stealing from him. He pointed out that he had done huge projects in the past, and yet he was now totally broke. How could this be? "The problem is, if I tell you the truth, I will lose you as a friend," I told him. Please, tell me," he begged. "Okay. To start with, always remember that it is harder to hold on to money than to make money. Teach it to your children, if nothing else. People who inherit businesses or money generally end up losing everything. The first thing you need to know is when you are making money and when you are not. A large turnover or a revenue does not mean you are making money." Then I say to him, "Before you tell me how much you made on this project and that, let's talk rather about how much you saved from what you made on each project." Then he looked at me with a bemused, almost blank look on his face. Then after a while he said, "I made investments." I looked him in the eye and said, "You know that is not true. You bought a nice car, you built a nice house, you did not invest in your capacity to make more money, and you did not save for the rainy day." Then I said, "Do you want us to carry on this discussion? It could become very painful for you." He looked down on the ground. I stopped. "Friends, if you have a job, any job, no matter how little you make, save something. If you are running a business, no matter how small, save something. Financial literacy is about making sound financial decisions. Step 1, hold on to your money. Open a bank account. Now here is a mystery. Studies recently undertaken on smallholder farmers showed that a farmer who opens a bank account is more likely to have money to buy seeds for the next planting season than one that has no bank account. Surprised? This is part of the mystery of wealth. The new Prime Minister of India, a man respected for his ability to bring millions of people out of poverty, has just embarked on a campaign to get millions of their poorest citizens to open bank accounts. Surprised? This is part of the mystery of wealth. The Chinese have long understood the importance of saving. It is the savings of millions of Chinese people that has driven their economic miracle. The Minister of Agriculture of Nigeria, Dr. Akin Adesina, a close friend and colleague, has embarked on a major campaign to get small-scale farmers in that country to open mobile bank accounts. Experts, including myself, believe that it will bring millions out of poverty. Surprised? This is part of the mystery of wealth. When people open bank accounts, it changes their mindset. It makes them want to save something. I know some of you working in the diaspora send money home. That is good. Now here is a piece of advice to add to your wisdom. Get them to open a bank account and send your money through the account. Then ask them to save at least 10 to 15% of whatever you send them every month. A brother said to me the other day, "How can I save if I spend 70% on transport to get to work?" "Either move closer to the workplace or buy a bicycle," I replied. "What you are doing is not sustainable." Do you have a bank account? Open another one. Calculate the cost first. Don't just start. Luke chapter 14 verse 28 to 29 in the Amplified Bible, it says, "For which of you wishing to build a firm building does not first sit down and calculate the cost to see whether he has sufficient means to finish it? Otherwise, when he has laid the foundation and is unable to complete the building, all who see it will begin to mock and jeer at him." I often say, everything important I ever learned about business, I learned from the Bible. What could be more practical than the above scripture taken from the Master himself? Jesus said, "First sit down and calculate the cost to see whether you have sufficient means to finish it." Flying over one of our African cities recently, my attention was caught by the number of people who have embarked on the huge housing projects that they were struggling to finish. You are left wondering why they did not go for something smaller that they could finish. Sadly, I often meet people who are in the same situation with their business projects. My heart always pains when I see this because I imagine what they are going through. When people start out in business, they are sometimes so excited about what they are going to achieve and they forget to sit down and calculate the cost. Sustainable success in business or even in a social enterprise is as much about managing your costs as it is about generating sales or revenue. I will sell my 10,000 kilograms of tobacco for $10 per kilogram and make $100,000. It's a lot of money, but what about the cost side? Sit down, calculate the cost. Once I buy the combi, I will make $5,000 per day. But what about the cost side? Sit down, calculate the cost. I will borrow money and buy an aeroplane. I will fly people every day and make $100,000. Really? Now, sit down, calculate the cost. It is interesting that the Lord did not simply say count the cost. He said calculate. The one who calculates does a deeper exercise than the one who simply counts. Another way of saying calculate is to say manage the cost. When you do not calculate the cost properly, you might even manage to buy the combi or the aeroplane or the telecoms equipment, and you will then operate it until it is old and battered and obsolete. Always calculate the cost first. Now you might say, what if something happens that I did not anticipate? Maybe it was beyond my control. The Lord, practical as ever, spoke about that too. Your turn to scratch the scriptures. Finally, let me say this. The cost goes beyond what it initially costs to set up a business, to run it profitably, ensure renewal and growth and sustainability. But you must also look at the cost on things like environment, public safety, and the health of others. Calculating the cost is all about managing a dynamic cost environment. Now you are in business. Go and prosper. End of chapter 10.